Shemai Paub, Prenanda Paub. It is about 5 o'clock on the first of a couple of days of warm weather. So as a break from adventure videos, we're going to try and fix a problem that I bought my way into. I took a punt on a cheap boat on eBay. If it's too good to be true, it often is too good to be true. And when I got it home and I had a proper look over it and peeled keel tape off it, I discovered that it's actually worn through the outer vinyl layer of the royalex. I think it's a 3-part sandwich vinyl ABS plastic, foam in the center. Anyhow, it's worn through the top and exposed the foam. Oddly, the foam is really quite smooth. So I've sought advice. Thank you to both people who've advised me not to sand it down particularly. G-Flex seemed to be the answer, so I've bought my G-Flex kit. G-Flex is a 2-part epoxy. You mix the resin and the hardener together, but when it sets with more flex than a standard epoxy. So in theory, it flexes very slightly with the hull and will absorb impacts slightly better. So it shouldn't break off or lift off the hull after impact and flexing. I've gone one step further, having read the G-Flex instructions. It seems pretty straightforward to lay fiberglass into it. I've no experience of fiberglassing, so I've bought some fiberglass strip. This is 50mm, and I'm going to lay the fiberglass over the wound. There's another wound lower down too, so I shall epoxy over, fiberglass on, and then I've actually cut down. Now it hasn't worked too well, I don't want to handle it too much, but I've cut down the 50mm into about 40mm, just so that there's a little it's slightly smaller, that there's the opposite to an overlap, I suppose, and hopefully the edges sit graduated, and just reinforce it, give it a little strength, rather than adding one line there of weakness. I didn't make the science up, that's what the box said to do, so that's what we're doing. And I've done a third strip that's going to go over the top as well. So in a nutshell, if it's too good to be true, usually is, I'm going to mark off now and tape the edges. I'm going to give it a real light sanding just to give something to key to grip to. I'm going to use isopropyl alcohol to clean that off, and then after giving that a little bit of time to breathe, I'm going to mix up the epoxy and paint on. Paintbrush, need to get a paintbrush. I'm going to paint the epoxy on between the tape. Then I'm going to lay the first bit of fiberglass in. I'm going to wet that out, saturate it, lay the second piece in, saturate that, and you know what, for good measure, I'm going to lay the third piece in as well. The bit I haven't decided is whether I will use tape. They talk about using parcel tape to keep it down, see-through wrapping tape, but I'm probably going to use cling film, just in case it rains overnight. It is Wales after all. So I am in the smallest workshop space ever, the little alleyway down the side of my house. I've put on some frog tape, not terribly well. £7 a roll, Gordon Bennett. Anyway, it's not turned out to be quite the cheap boat I thought. I can't get you in, everything's hitting the walls, but there is the damage. So you can see outer vinyl layer, red down here, inner layer of the vinyl, the colours come off. I suppose maybe it's ABS plastic, I ought to do my research. And then the camera won't zoom, but you can see where the outer layer is split and the inner layer of foam. I don't know how sharply it will see for you, but it is it's quite a smooth foam, so there's no hole. But where am I? Out here. Can we zoom again, please? There are bits that are softer along here, so I want to reinforce all of this with that glass fibre, and then I'm going to put a skid plate over the top. I'm under strict instructions not to sand it too heavily. That one is like the coarsest fine paper I've ever known, but I dug this finer grit out. I'm looking at what it is, 280 grit. It's essentially all I've got, so it is what it is. I'm going to give a quite light dust, try and rough this red surface up just very gently, a tiny bit here just to take off the edge, and then I'm going to clean with isopropyl and get gluing. So without further ado, just breaking the back of the paper so I can get it around the corners a little more easily. I should have clarified, I have cleaned the boat down already. I had to take the adhesive off from the previous keel strips with WD-40, and then I gave it a good soapy wash. Right, this grit isn't quite as aggressive as I thought it would be. Now, the advice in the instructions is to sand a V, open the crack right up and sand a V in. And I think if it was a split, that's absolutely what I do. But for now, it's not a split. I'm just going to try and fill that. Royalex is apparently quite a delicate plastic. I suppose all plastics are to certain degrees, and there are solvents that it doesn't like. I also understand, I hope that I've got it right, because the Americans use a lot of different names like denatured alcohol for methylated spirits over here in the UK. Apparently, is it isopropyl alcohol? I believe that's what it's called. Apparently that is okay for Royalex. I've also heard that WD-40 is. I did use it sparingly to get the adhesive off, but I was afraid that anything petrol based might be too much. So isopropyl alcohol is what I'm using. I'll try and keep it out of the foam in case it starts eating it away, but just give it a good old coat, really. Good old coat, a good old scrub, and it evaporates really quite quickly. But just trying to take the dust off, trying to take the grime, dirt, anything else then before we get into the business of gluing it. And while that is drying, we'll start to measure out and mix up the G-Flex. So the kit came with these handy mixing pallets. The tubes are actually much, much bigger than I anticipated them being, which is almost a shame, because I've ordered a litre of G-Flex so that I can put the skid plates on later on. That's to come. I'm going to deal with this bit of the video first. If this goes all right, I'll show you the skid plates in a day or two. Of course, you only need to hang on a few more moments. But for now, dispense equal portions by volume onto the plastic pallet, mix thoroughly, clamp and complete within 45 minutes. Let's go for. And the nice thing about this is you can get it wrong by up to 20% and it will still mix and cure okay. So I'm eyeballing that, but it seems to be pretty good. Let's carefully get the lids back on. So red is the hardener. This is G-Flex 655, which is the smallest pallet ever. I've bought a bucket for the litre one. This is 655, which is the thicker, and indeed it is. And I'm wishing that I'd got a slightly bigger pallet, and if I'm honest, I'm wishing that I'd put the gloves on as well. So that was a massive mistake. Okay, you need to mix and 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 mix until it's all a uniform colour, and then you need to mix some more apparently. It doesn't make up that much, although it is now all over me. I brought a paintbrush because that's what I've seen, but I don't think a paintbrush is going to cut it. I'm going to splodge this on and see where we go. I hope that's mixed up enough. It didn't seem like an awful lot of mixing. Wow, that is thick stuff. But let's get that on to start with. You've got 45 minutes, it says, from getting it on to its setting sort of unworkable, if that's, I mean, or the opposite, if you want to consider it the opposite, where you can sand it. Would that be workable too? So I've already got glue everywhere, which was absolutely totally predictable. I wonder if paintbrush might be useful to spread it. I also now know I haven't got enough to wet out the fabric too, which is a real shame, but I don't suppose it'll take me too long to fix that. The difficulty is knowing how much is too much. I suppose I need enough on to grab the material, but not so much that it adds kilos and kilos to the weight of the boat. I have to keep an eye on the time as well, because I need to, I can't remember why I need to keep an eye on the time. Oh, I need to mix another load of material, of glue, and get this in. That's looking all right. What I did learn is it doesn't cut well at all. Strands of fiberglass everywhere. And then I'm gonna have to mix more glue to wet that out. So if I've learned anything, it is to wear gloves, use a bigger mixing thing than you'll think you'll need, try really hard not to get epoxy absolutely everywhere, and keep at least one finger clean to turn the video off. You heard a lot of me talking then, but I suspect not an awful lot of me actually doing, because the camera was set a little bit low. I'm going to need to mix more of this now and then try and get it on. Now, in my little head, I was hoping that this would go on more with like a sort of paintbrush, and that's not been the case. I have got glue absolutely all over me. Right, let's go for another mix on a palette that's too small. If I didn't say it before, I wish I'd picked up something bigger to mix with. Well, that works quite well. I don't suppose you can see, but I'm cupping it in my hand. I don't think that this would go on with a paintbrush, you know. This is the 655, it's the thickened version. I thought that would be better because I was filling in a hole with it. I think I would have preferred to have a paintbrush on this than a spatula. I really don't know how much is enough and how much is too much, but given that it's the stern of the boat and that takes quite a lot of impact off the rocks and whatnot, a bit too thick is probably okay. It seems to be going on easier one side than the other. Maybe it's just the view I've got. So I've got a couple of regrets already. Not knowing the consistency is definitely one of them. Not wearing gloves is another. And with hindsight, it would probably have been better to have used the 650 instead of 655, the thickened stuff. Right, I was talking about putting multiple layers on, wasn't I? I don't know if you're following still, but I've gone off that idea a little bit. I wonder if I've left enough space there for the resin to attach to the boat before the tape. I believe that that's the fabric wetted out. The good news with the thickened stuff is it is supposed to be easier to sand, so maybe I just need to lash it on and then sand it to feather it. Now the other good news is there's a skid plate going over the top of this, so that should be okay too. That's looking pretty good. That is looking pretty good. I'm not sure I've got quite enough down here, but we'll try and scrape some off there. Oh, I've got loads on there. Make sure that all my edges are wetted down. Now there are two ways as well of adding layers. The one is immediately and to keep wetting out. The other is to let it cure, and instead of that chemical bond, to create a mechanical. Right, let's mix one more, and because it's a weak spot, I'm desperately going to try to get the second piece of glass. In fact, let's put the second piece of glass now and force myself. Second piece was coming much more up here. You're on. You're on. Now, I said earlier, if you were listening, that I cut 50mm tape down with scissors. That didn't work quite so well just there. You can see it's feathered pretty awfully, but hopefully we'll get a bit more glue on there. Right. Oh god, there is glue everywhere. Everywhere. See you in a minute. Welcome back to the morning after the night before, and it's not fully cured. I knew the temperature would dip overnight. It ideally wants something around 20 degrees. It was about 23, 22 I think when I put it on, and I knew it would drop, but today is going to sit at 20, 24 degrees for the bulk of the day, so it's going to have a really great temperature to finish that cure, and it gave me time then to put the skid plate on Saturday as well. These areas here, single layer, have wetted out pretty well. I don't think I managed to wet out on that corner there, but this has wetted out pretty well. I'm pretty pleased. Keeping the focus here, the double layer has wetted out pretty well, but as I run up, there's a whole section here on the first wider 50mm layer that I put down that I don't think I wetted out enough. I'm not sure why that was. Same on both sides. You can see thick layers of epoxy, but it hasn't wetted out, and I can feel the edge of the fabric. Now, ordinarily, that would really upset me. It's definitely a lesson learned, because that is wetted out, and that is not wetted out. However, I'm going to use the same sort of epoxy, the 650, so slightly runnier. I'll be able to brush that one on. I'm going to lay a skid plate then from down here up and over, so the whole thing is going to have another coat of epoxy over the top, which will fill any little messy areas. I could sand this down. I'm a little concerned in places that it's pretty thick. The focus isn't working great for me, but it is pretty thick there. I know it is, I can feel it. So I could sand that down. You can see the thickness there. I could definitely sand that down to a degree. But I'm not sure there's much point, to be honest. I'm going to sand it to rough it up and then just put the skid plate over the top. I was only going to use epoxy for this repair anyway, so whatever strength the fiberglass is adding is definitely better than nothing at all. With hindsight, my tape, my green tape, got too close to the fiberglass just there. With hindsight, I would have left a slightly bigger gap. I took the tape off too early on this side and it made a real dog's dinner of it, so that's a lesson for us all as well. That said, I didn't want the skid plate to have to go too wide over the top. Even that, finger to thumb, feels pretty substantial, and it only just covers. So I wanted to make sure I had a good, what's that, 10 or 15 mil either side for the skid plate to adhere fully as well. Otherwise the skid plate would just be clinging to that plate and I run the danger of the whole lot coming off. The other thing that occurred to me is maybe I didn't rough up the surface quite enough. I think I did, but I'll go for a heavier gauge, a coarser sandpaper when I prepare this to give it something to really bite into, and we'll go from there. So that is where we are right now. You're probably 27 minutes into, an unnecessarily long video. I will try to add the skid plate shenanigans into the end of this.